right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the American Floral Endowments Grow Pro webinar series. I am your moderator, Laura Reese. I am a member of AFE's Young Professionals Council and a lead grower with the plant company. I received my bachelor's in plant science from Penn State, and before my time at the plant company, I worked as a research assistant at the University of Georgia and an assistant grower manager with Green Circle Growers. Today's session is on automation ROI, tips to maximize profit, company buy-in, and worker satisfaction. On behalf of the endowment, I'm excited to be part of AFE's Grow Pro webinar series that features a new topic every month presented by an industry expert. The webinars are free to everyone thanks to the generous support of AFE sponsors. The views and opinions expressed in these webinars are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of AFE. As an independent nonprofit, AFE cannot endorse any specific product or opinion. If you are interested in becoming a sponsor for one of our Grow Pro webinars, you can find that information on AFE's website at endowment.org/growpro. Today's session was pre-recorded in English by Chris Rocheleau. After the presentation, Chris will join us for a Q&A. Feel free to submit your questions through the Q&A feature or a chat at any time. We'll answer as many as we can before the end of the hour. Unanswered questions may be answered through a separate email exchange. This session is being recorded and will be shared to AFE's YouTube account. Through YouTube's accessibility features, you can access closed captions in other languages. To get us started, I'd like to share a bit about today's expert speaker. Chris is the general manager of Phoenix Foliage at ForemostCo. Prior to this role, he served as a sales rep where he successfully developed ForemostCo's Texas territory. Chris earned a degree in ornamental horticulture from the University of Massachusetts Amherst and brings extensive expertise in ornamental plant production and greenhouse management. His previous roles include positions at YC Nursery, Casa Flora, and Costa Farms, where he served as young plants head grower. With a deep understanding of both the production and sales sides of the industry, Chris offers a unique perspective on scalability and production workflow. Chris, welcome, and thank you for presenting today on automation ROI.
Okay, thank you for that introduction, Laura. And now to go into the presentation. So we're going to be discussing return on investment, or ROI, tips to maximize profit, company buy-in, and worker satisfaction. And often company buy-in and worker satisfaction are things that are either overlooked or not thought about when maximizing profit. They can be separate things, but in this webinar, we're going to be talking about how they're intimately connected and how they have to be thought about throughout the entire process. So we're going to start off this webinar talking about return on investment and automating, making investments in technology that help you to automate practices in your greenhouse. So why would you want to automate? Why would you want to go down this road? The most obvious one is to increase profits. You want to reduce non-value added work, some of which we can't ever completely avoid. When we work with people have to leave their work site to go and use the restroom. They have to go to break. They have to walk to break. But if there is non-value added work, and we'll touch on some examples in this webinar, but it could be part of the process where they're walking to and from the cooler to get their own plants to plant on a sticking line, which is what we're going to be using as an example today. Each time they're walking to and from the planting line, they're not planting, they're getting their plants for them, bringing them back into the greenhouse, and their productivity is going way down. So this is a non-value added part of the process, and how can we eliminate that part of the process? And we'll see that today. We want to increase the productivity of labor force. And increasing productivity of labor force is not saying, hey, plant faster, move faster, work harder. Yeah, that works on a short-term basis, but it drives people away from your business, increases turnover, results in not enjoyable working environment. We want to find a way to make people more productive by enabling them to be more productive and take barriers out of their way. Let's work smarter, not harder. We want to increase resource and space utilization. So if you have existing space where new equipment could be housed and not making investments into building new structures to house new equipment, that's something to look into and consider. in our example, we'll be talking about getting rid of, we stored a lot of material in areas. We had people with very large offices for not particularly known reason or useful reason. We better utilize that space for a production area. We're also going to be talking about space utilization, and there's ways to use automation in order to increase the turns within a greenhouse. So the number of plants per square meter in a greenhouse is how we can very quickly figure out the profitability of a structure, is how many units do we sell out of that greenhouse and how many times can we turn and flip more units through that greenhouse. So increased space utilization, but also increasing number of turns through automation is other aspects to consider when considering investing in automation. Maintain and improve quality and consistency. So there will be people on different sides of the fence with this. Often complexity is seen as an increase to quality. I've seen that throughout the industry in my 20 or so years in the industry, that some people think that their complicated process is increasing their quality, and it may, and maybe maybe that works, but often that's not able to be easily automated, nor is it often scalable. So finding ways to increase simplicity, to encourage automation, will improve consistency of a decided upon spec with your customer, and that quality constantly being provided to your customer is stability that your customer often appreciates. And that's what I think of when I think of quality. Scalable, automated quality comes through simplicity and consistency in product spec. And that's something to consider when looking to automate. Growing your company, increasing the number of turns, as we mentioned, increase the number of plants per square meter. These are things to always keep in mind to increase your profitability. Improve working environment for employees. So why would you automate? Improving environment for employees. If you can reduce your turnover with employees, you're going to have more employees with a longevity with the company, more experience that you're capturing and keeping in-house. Those people will be paid more, but you'd also hope that they're also improving their efficiency with their experience over time as well. So improving the working environment and reducing turnover often benefits the company. Lowering your head count, so I don't need as many employees to achieve the same amount of productivity, while also increasing the income per employee. You know, you can become more profitable by reducing your head count, but if you're not going to pay your employees to keep those employees around, you're creating an unstable environment. You want employees to stay. So capture your profits by reducing your head count, but then reward the employees that stay, because you're picking the best of the best, the cream of the crop. That's your A team that you want to keep around, and so pay them accordingly. Okay. As a rule of thumb, and the way I think and operate, is happy workers tend to be more productive and engaged. And this is what I've found in working in the industry for quite some time now. So how can you implement automation and measure that return on investment? So we're going to go through this example. We're going to be talking about a planting line that we bought from Agronomics, now known as Adept Ag. And then other investments we made after this initial implementation of retrofitting our H102 ELIPOT machine, which is a ELIPOT making machine that then is manually, then the ELIPOTs are then manually placed into trays. And we added a turbo multiflex to that H102, which now resulted in automated filling of the trays. That was in addition to this planting line that we'll be discussing mostly. We then also bought a refrigerated truck because we have 3 different locations. And in order to utilize this planting line for approximately 90% of our production today, we needed to be able to bring material to our 2 other locations, because we have three growing locations, and we wanted a centralized planting line. And we also then ended up, to better utilize the machine, we had to standardize a single 72 cell pack tray, which is the major tray we use here at Phoenix Foliage. And we also now are looking into changing our media, but we did standardize our media to 1 media, and now we're making a change to that media to further increase the efficiency of the ELIPOT machine. We'll be unpackaging all this in the next several slides, but this is the journey we're going to be going down in making an investment, and we'll be starting from the beginning. So with Agronomics and Adept Ag planting line, this was the project that we worked on actually at the end of middle of 2023. The opportunity that was needing to be addressed. So we first had to identify the opportunity or the problem. but all problems are opportunities because there's something that can be resolved. So think you got to start off on a positive note here. So planting on the benches in the greenhouse, it has been standard for a very long time in different parts of the world and different parts of the industry, and still to this day, of planting on the benches results in better quality. And my team can plant on the benches the product, and then it's ready and under the mist if you're propagating, for example, and it's ready there for the growers to keep an eye on and all of that. However, there's a lot of downsides to efficiency, and I'll even point out quality as we go through this process as well, to planting on the bench. So I saw this as an opportunity to increase efficiency, increase profitability, and also increase quality. And we'll talk about how we did that. So we have to go through, how do we create an ROI? How do we improve uniformity and quality? How can we implement piecework and measure our employees? How can we improve their pay? How can we improve their working conditions? How can we improve the efficiency of the individual planters, but with this investment? How can we eliminate non-value added work? And how can we increase the ease and training of new employees by getting a planting line versus planting on the benches? So the ROI, simple math, relatively simple math. You have to be a little bit imaginative, but you want to remain conservative in your estimates here. It's always best, as we'll discuss later, to under promise and over deliver. So use realistic numbers, use worst case scenarios. Don't be too pessimistic or too conservative to the point where it makes everything look unaffordable. But keep in mind that there will be ramp up times to hit certain goals. And so starting with the goal that you may have over many months as your initial improvement is not the way to start. So let me walk you through this. To buy the planting line, remove a few offices, retrofit the area with some electrical outlets and drains and different things, we estimated that the project would cost approximately $75,000 in total. That's what we needed from the company. We proposed it would also allow us to reduce the need for production or planting from 14 people planting 7 trays an hour, which was our documented average per person of the 72 cell pack, 1 PPP tray, which is our most produced type configuration of a tray. That was averaging 7 trays an hour with 14 people, or 98 trays per hour. We wanted to reduce that head count for the same productivity to 10 people planting 10 trays an hour, which would be 100 trays an hour between that group of people. We utilize the total cost of a single employee at approximately $20 an hour times 2,080 hours per year. Each employee has a cost to the company of around $41,000, $42,000. You can argue, well, we don't pay everybody $20 an hour. But when you look at benefits and everything else that's included, in addition to the person's hourly wages, we like to use a conservative number of $20 an hour. We also, though, work far more hours than 2,000 hours a year. Our crews tend to work more than 40 hours a week on average. So this is a conservative estimate, but approximately an employee costs the company around $41,000 a year. So if 4 positions were eliminated from the line, the value of that would basically result in a return on investment of the $75,000 in around 6 months. Okay. So then the improved uniformity and quality. Well, this is one of the first sticking points that we had pushed back from kind of the standard operating procedure we had of planting on the benches. Well, quality is going to drop if people are speeding up. That's a fair thought, but you have to find a way to prevent this 100%, because that's what we produce. We produce quality plants on time, in full, fulfillment of orders with the same expected quality or spec of a product. That's what our industry is made out of. So how do we improve quality? By centralizing this material onto the line, I can have a crew leader inspect each tray individually as it comes off the line as she's placing them onto the racks to go into the greenhouse. Previously, trays were laid out, empty trays were laid out on the benches. All planters had their plants. They all went down either side of the bench. They all planted somewhat independently. And yes, I can tell you, the crew leader will tell you that they reviewed every tray. The grower will tell you they reviewed every tray. However, I can tell you as the general manager of the farm that details were overlooked. when you're looking at a massive group of trays or an entire bench, you're not going to address details the same way as if you look at one tray at a time. And you're not going to address the planters in a timely fashion. So if a planter just made an error, made a mistake, that's the best time to also inform that employee that they made an error. This is how to correct it. Please correct it for me and send it back down the line. And so we have a increased amount of visibility on quality by moving to a single planting line and away from planting on the benches. We then wanted to measure employees, and we wanted to measure them in order to have a goal of achieving piecework. Piecework is when you're paid a certain amount per unit you produce. So we were going to pay by the tray. The employees would always make their minimum hourly wage, whatever that minimum wage may be that they're making per hour. But if they were to exceed a certain threshold of trays per hour, they would then, for every tray past that amount, be paid a bonus. This would be averaged over the course of the week, but close at the end of the week. So if they had a great day and then a poor performance day, unfortunately, those days would average out and it would result in them not getting a bonus. But if they were exceeding on average above the designated threshold throughout the entire week, they would receive a bonus. So we can document productivity of the individuals because they're all centralized and begin implementing the piecework. This would result in better pay for individuals. If quality suffered, like I mentioned previously, the supervisor could have a correction of that mistake with the employee. The employee would have the tray returned to them, and they're incentivized to work in a timely fashion. Watch what they do per hour. Don't go wandering away from the line. You don't want to supply yourself with your own plants. You want that supplied by your supervisor. So you're really focused on the planting. But if you're making a mistake, you don't want to be making mistakes because you're having to fix those trays, which slows down the number of trays you can produce per hour. So there's checkpoints in there. What we did is we took $15 an hour, which is the soon to be the minimum wage in the state of Florida, and we began assigning achievable standards of trays per hour and then a dollar amount for each. So as I mentioned earlier, our 72 cell pack 1 PPP, which is in the middle of this sheet in the first column, or I'm sorry, third column from the left, 72 cell pack 1 PPP, 1 plant per cell, 1 plant per pot. We assign that $1.25 an hour because if you take $15 divided by 12 trays an hour, that results in $1.25 value for each tray they produced. So when an employee produces 13 trays or more an hour, they're going to be receiving $1.25 for every tray past 12 trays they're producing per hour. We then use this and some rough math to figure out standard rates for other tray configurations that did exist, most of which still exist, but some of which have already been eliminated. And we came up with other rates and then other dollar amounts using the same principle of how many trays per hour based on $15 an hour. So if we're doing 10 trays an hour divided by, or $15 divided by 10 trays an hour, that's $1.50 per tray with these configurations of trays. So we came up with this. This is publicly seen and has been updated as we've increased minimum wage in the state of Florida, and our employees are aware of what every tray is valued at. So we wanted to improve the pay for individual employees that would stay on the line. We also wanted to improve working conditions. Planting on the benches means that the mist is often running. The mist is spraying the employees in the face, or they're covering the mist heads, which isn't good for the plants. They're working on an uneven setting. The bench may be too high to comfortably plant. It may be too low to comfortably plant. They may have to reach to the middle of the bench to get a tray. High relative humidity, higher temps, yada, yada. The environment's appropriate for plants, but not for our employees. So we wanted them to have a centralized area where they could have dry feet, away from the automated mist, a shaded location. We changed the poly on the area, reduce relative humidity, uniform planting height with sloped tables, more ergonomically correct to plant on, not to grow on, and not having to reach for their trays, which was hurting their lower backs. So these were all achievements we were going to get by centralizing and moving to a planting line as well. Want to improve the efficiency. Supervisors now need to supply the entire team with all the plants they need, all the trays they need, all the labels they need. Anything an employee planting on the line needs to be provided by the supervisor. And that's what one of the supervisor's main goals is, to keep the line going, in addition to maintaining quality on the other end. And she's paid appropriately to do so, not based on anything different than an hourly wage. But a nice increase was given to her to keep everybody flowing and to maintain that quality for our growing team. Employees better utilize their time to focus on planting. They're incentivized to plant as many trays per hour. So playing with the phone, taking phone calls, wandering around. We don't really have any smokers on our line, but people wanting to go smoke or just things that aren't needed to be done, distractions throughout the day. Those kind of eliminated themselves because we're incentivizing employees to focus on the task at hand. We also eliminated some non-value added work. So the planting line is purposely next to our restrooms and purposely next to the break area to eliminate the non-value added walking time back and forth to these areas that people have to go to throughout the day. Dibbling. Dibbling is actually a value added task or part of the work. So we have to make a small hole into the LE pot to then place the plant into. We could pay employees to do this, but we've eliminated making 72 individual holes by an employee before then placing 72 individual plants, for example. And we've mechanized this process where a plate on the line comes and pushes 72 holes, 72 pins, which push 72 holes and dibble the entire tray for our employees. This was a way of automating I mean, it is a labor-intensive part of the process and enables our employees to plant now at a faster rate. We also improved the ease of training because now employees are placed on this planting line side by side, whereas on a bench with trays already laid out, they would all position themselves about, if there are 3 employees on one side of the bench, they'd all place themselves about 30% of the bench length apart or more to have them spaced out, and they'd work towards each other, which is inefficient as well. They couldn't get past each other. They all needed plant material, but also they weren't learning from each other. They were all learning how to plant at whatever speed they learned how to plant and with whatever process they taught themselves to plant. I mean, they may have been trained some, but tendencies of humans is to always find the path they find of least resistance. So people were coming up with their own planting methods individually and not being properly trained and not being trained by the best employees, which may have been planting on the same bench, but be 18 or 20 feet away from them. They're not going to see what that person's doing and learn best practices on a regular basis and create some uniformity in how all of our planters work and plant. Also, by moving to piecework, they're also incentivized monetarily from the beginning to learn how others are succeeding as quickly as possible. So best practices are learned quickly in this case. And our crew leader, if they have a new employee, would position that new employee to be next to one of the most skilled employees on the line for a period of weeks or months in order to enable them to learn as quickly as possible. And so those are all steps that have been achieved now with automating this process and making this investment. So to go over the results and some interesting little things that we learned along the way. Quality's been maintained, and I think it could even be argued it's improved with better oversight. Working conditions have definitely improved. The environment has good ventilation, has good heating. There's not a lot of free moisture in the area. And so the environment's more inviting and more comfortable for employees to work on. They work on a padded floor. It's a concrete floor, but we installed a strip of padding that the employees work on for comfort. We've also are looking at eventually increasing insulation in this area and even trying to air conditioning the area for our employees. Like we mentioned, new employees do learn more easily and quickly and are onboarded faster. Employees want to be on the line and they ask to be moved to the line. When we first started this, there was hesitation, there was fear of being measured, it was a cultural change. Now employees ask to be on the line. They want to be on the line, and we keep the most skilled employees on the line for the entirety of the year and move other employees onto the line as workloads require during peak season. Employees make more per hour in production than previously, and honestly more than in most other departments. We exceeded our 10 trays an hour goal by setting, again, by under promising and over delivering. And now we sit just below 14 trays an hour with over half the production team, while the other half is meeting that 10 tray an hour goal. And I expect that to continue to improve. We've seen continual improvement. This is actually our second spring we're going into now with the production line. The first season, we didn't get necessarily our full gain, but we did reach that 10 tray an hour across everybody. But at this point in time, we've basically doubled our efficiency in planting with the core team that stays on that line year round. And new employees even are meeting 10 trays an hour. But I expect that continue to, as people continue to refine and practice their skills, just like with any sport, I think we can see higher numbers. And with experience at other companies I've worked at, I've seen very good quality coming off the line and employees reaching upwards of 20 trays an hour with a 72 cell pack tray production when standardized goals are given and incentives are made. We supplied the crew leader actually with a second employee as an assistant to keep up with the productivity of the line because the line is so much more productive. She needed help to keep everybody filled on plants, soil, tags, and everything else. So she has somebody helping. That person is also helping to put down the product when necessary, when there is downtime, as well as keeping the trucks that are coming to pick up fresh product loaded. Interesting little story into the photo to the left. When we went to the automated dibbler, our employees were very concerned because it wasn't always hitting the LE pot directly in the exact center. I mean, it was interesting how engaged and focused the employees were about centering that hole. We actually had to do a training with the employees that if the circle fell anywhere within, or if the dibble fell anywhere within the yellow circle, it was acceptable. The LE pot's a little bit loose in the tray. It can slightly move from one side to another. It's not a important detail, but it was something the employees were actually redibbling trays that had been dibbled by the machine, and we wanted to stop this. So what we said is, if the paper on the edge of the LE pot for some reason is dibbled, and the LE pot itself is damaged, that needs to be corrected. Otherwise, if that hole lands anywhere in the center of this cell, it's centered, and that's fine. We won't receive a credit. Customers won't complain. It also won't hurt their production methods. It doesn't hurt our productivity or our production on the benches. Anywhere in the center of that center-ish of that LE pot was acceptable. And this is also going back to automation. We always want to be as detailed as possible. We want things to be as quality as possible, but focusing on things that really aren't producing any quality or any improvement for us, and wasting time on that is not something to focus on or to deter from those added benefits of increased efficiency and productivity with your team to try and recenter this hole. That was something we had to work with them to correct, and they wanted to see it. They wanted to physically see it. They wanted it in writing, and so we provided it in both English and Spanish for them. Another thing the supervisor mentioned was she was still going back and forth to our cooler, which is located a little ways away, and that's a permanent installation. We can't move that cooler. But we made her a temporary cooler, which is not perfect, but is good enough to supply her with what she does is she loads that closet, basically small insulated closet with a air conditioner. She goes ahead and loads that with product the night before, so she has enough product in there to last her one day, and she can pull straight from that closet to the line. And now you can see that's within 15 or 20 feet from the line, which allows her to continue to measure that quality that she needs to maintain for the growing team. In order for us to move more material into the 72 LE pot tray and get more trays into the LE pot, we realized the employee, which had an incredible capacity of 60 trays an hour that they could fill manually, we wanted to improve that. So then we made a further investment to add the turbo multi-flex to our existing H102 LE pot machine, thus automating the filling of the trays and moving us from 60 to 90 trays an hour. Again, another cultural change, but this, I was actually able to pay the employee more. They're actually doing physically less work. He's not a spring chicken. He's done his time. And at the same time, he's now producing 50% more. So we gave him an increase of pay, and he has a better working environment as well. We were then, because we continued to consolidate different tray sizes, we eliminated a 102, a 98 cell pack, and others, and moved them into 72s. Our volume of 72 cell pack of a single style of 72 cell pack increased, and we negotiated pricing with our vendor. In the process, we are in the process of changing our media now, because we realize our media still has too many sticks and other and it's resulting in the LE pot machine not working to its full capacity. But by moving to a simpler mix that's better screened, we're hoping to get to over 100 trays an hour produced by this machine as well. And this machine had a return on investment, if I'm not mistaken, of less than a year as well when we looked at it as well. So that again, it was another win for us. In order to do all of our production on the planting line and having 3 different locations, we did have to go ahead and begin leasing a truck. So we were leasing a truck that we utilized to get the material from our line to our 2 other outlying locations so that we don't have to plant on the benches there as well. So how does this happen? How do we talk about the cultural changes, the people involved, and how do we identify who all the players are? Well, I think it starts with what I'm calling an identifier. This is the person that has to ID a problem, begin to rally people around it, keeping in mind each has their own unique objectives and motivations. And the reason why we have to think about this up front is because from the very beginning of this concept coming, change of culture, change in general, making an investment, there is going to be fear of change, fear of my self-worth as an employee. Am I going to be needed anymore? There's going to be employees that are fearful. There's going to be your employer that, if you're not the owner of the company, that may be fearful as well. As I'm making a huge investment. How do I know what I'm going to get out of this? So you need to, from the beginning of this concept, be talking with and getting everybody used to this change that will be coming, that we will be, getting quotes on. We will be having people come and consult and look at the area, look at what's best suits our needs. We want employees and owners and everybody in between, supervisors, talking to the vendors, talking and engage in this process. And we want them asking questions that you can either answer, calm, or consider from the very beginning, the infant stages of this process. So everybody's used to it. There's that whole analogy or whatnot about, you can heat that water up slowly in the frog, or the story, I guess, the frog will stay in that water if you heat it up slowly over time to the point at which the frog doesn't know what's going on. The frog could actually die in that water, which is not the best analogy, not the most positive analogy. But if you drop a frog into boiling hot water, it's going to hop out and react to it. So in this setting, we're looking to slowly introduce everybody that there's going to be a change. We're going to need their help. We want to hear their input from the beginning, which will result in better buy-in from this. If a machine shows up one day, someone's not going to like that. It's not going to go well. And you're going to have people not purposely sabotaging, but people not helping in the implementation of a change of process, of a change of culture, of a change in your company that could be very beneficial for everyone. So you have to think about that when looking at also, the number of trays produced per hour and whatnot. So obviously one of the first ones you got to do is you got to be able to get that money from the owner. Accounting often has to approve that investment as well. So normally they're going to be financially motivated. Obviously they're going to care about improved working environments for their employees, but you're really going to want to concentrate on coming up with, again, conservative numbers for ROIs that are going to show increased efficiency and eventually increased profits. Don't be so conservative that it looks unaffordable again, but be conservative enough that you are going to come out swinging, and within a few months of the implementation, you can have a solid win. And winning more after that, everybody will be okay with and happy with. No one's ever going to complain, oh, I wish you had told me we were going to be even more profitable. No one will ever say that to you. That's just going to be another pat on the back when they realize it later on. But be conservative in your estimates when you're creating an ROI so that your owner and the accounting department can say, hey, this worked out pretty well, and they're comfortable with you making a future investment. Okay, talking with leadership. I'm personally not going to be running this line on a regular basis. I have experience running lines from earlier in my career, but this is not going to be my role. So I need to work with leadership, and leadership is going to be concerned about their employees pushing back. They're going to be concerned about if they're going to be able to handle this new responsibility. They're going to be concerned about different things. So making management or supervisors comfortable with, we're going to standardize the process. Well, that makes your job simpler. You're going to have better control because it's centralized. Makes the leadership's life easier. Okay. And the company, in this case, we were looking towards moving towards piecework, which would result in a bonus pay structure for our employees. So on top of this, hey, not only are we're going to ask you to maintain equality with your employees and hold them to new standards and enforce new standard operating procedures on a daily basis, but also don't worry, we're going to pay them more too. And we're going to pay you more as well as also for running this. The company is going to gain from this, but so is everybody that's working on the line on a daily basis. And it's important to definitely explain to them how you're going to take care of the employees that will be on the line, as well as the supervisors and management that will be running the line or the investment on a regular basis. You have to work with the vendors. I think management or general manager or who's ever purchasing this, who's ever in charge of this project, that identifier, they need to start working with vendors during peak times. They need to be able to step out of the role from day to day and start working with them on the pricing, the quotes, the timelines, and yada, yada, because you want this product or you want that new investment to be installed and not during your busy time. The worst thing you can do is get if your busy season is going to be like for us, is going to be December through February. I don't want this machine showing up in November. I don't want to start off with peak production, a change of culture, uncertain employees going into the peak time. We will fail. And failure from the beginning will result in a sour taste in our employees' mouth. It'll result in a sour taste in our employer's mouth. No one's going to want to fully utilize this machine after a poor season with it. So getting it in prior allows you to work out some of those kinks and get everybody used to this change of culture, change of practice at your company. So I think that's a critical thing. I know vendors are going to want to spread us all out to have sales throughout the entire year, but to the best of your ability. And luckily, they support different customers that all have different peaks throughout the year. But getting something during your peak season to the best of your ability with your vendors, look to schedule that and avoid it. And honestly, if that results in you delaying a purchase 1 year, even if that means your cost will be slightly higher for that, that I would think it's more important that you start at a slower season of the year than rush something quickly, have it show up just before or during peak season and start off failing, because you're not going to get the full bang for your buck out of that machine once you've started off on the wrong foot, or it will take very long time because people will start with the wrong mindset around this being an improvement for everybody. Instead, they see it as a negative, and changing that once that's been determined by your employees, even if it's not, or an employer, even if it's not correct, it's hard to change people's mindsets when they start off on the wrong foot. Maintenance. This is often overlooked. You have to assess, is your maintenance team capable of handling improving or increased sophistication in mechanization or automation. If your maintenance team can't handle it, don't expect them to handle it. They either need increased training or you need to invest in getting a different another level of maintenance. And that can also be done by having an annual scheduled maintenance by the manufacturer. Have them come out and look at their machine. And this might cost you $1,000 or $3,000 or something of that nature per year, but that small investment made annually will keep that machine up and running and working. And it's best to do this just prior going into peak season, because during peak season, if you have a reduced headcount, if you've had increased profitability over the years or whatnot, and then that machine goes down during a peak season, you don't have the bandwidth or the team that can keep you online and keep you up to speed. So that machine becomes more valuable every season, or the maintenance on that machine becomes more valuable every season you benefit from it. And it needs to be kept up to speed. You need to have some parts on property that in a pinch you can swap out quickly to keep things running. You cannot be down for 1 or 2 or 3 weeks waiting for parts, waiting for somebody with the technical savvy to come out and change something, waiting for a board to be manufactured or something like that. You need to make sure that this machine will hum through peak season. If there's going to be a breakdown, you never want to break down, but if there's going to be a breakdown in off season is normally survivable, because we're not working the same number of hours or the entirety of the week on that single machine. So something to consider there. And the employees from the beginning, they have to know what are you doing. You don't need to talk about what you're talking about with the owner or accounting that's going to make the company more profitable. None of your employees, honestly, that's not their focus. Okay, they want to succeed, they want to be part of a winning team, but they don't go home at night and think, I'm glad Phoenix is winning. And I have to realize that they want to pay their bills, they want to take care of their family, they want to do better for themselves. And so when you're making a change for the company that benefits the owner and a smaller group of people, you have to explain how's it going to benefit everyone. So a better working environment is key to this. If you're improving the working environment, that has to be sold and explained to your employees from the beginning of this process. Talk about better pay. ensure you're going to achieve that. Don't say something, don't ever promise something you can't provide to an owner, but also to an employee, because they will remember that forever. If you can't provide better pay, don't mention it. But if you can, do. And as you dial in on how much more that will be and whatnot, then you can begin to explain those details. But don't ever talk about an increase in pay that you will then not provide for an employee, because you've really hurt your trust relationship with them. Regular acknowledgments of successful weeks. So you need to be engaged when this new machinery or automation comes to the greenhouse. And each week that your team is successful with it or you're seeing gains, you have to constantly remind them, hey, you're doing better. And you need to be there to support them when they're having issues. And hey, okay, so that didn't work. So why don't we do this instead? But keep things on track. Don't allow problems to fester and persist. And also acknowledge improvement on a regular basis. Don't wait 6 months to see the entire story. Tell them on a weekly or daily basis, hey, this is better. Hey, this is looking good. Hey, we're on the right track here. Those are things to do with your entire group and on a regular basis to result in a cultural change. And make sure you move in a consistent direction. When implementing piecework, and I learned this at a previous employer, we actually set a higher bar than what we were producing without piecework. But then that wasn't high enough for the owner later. So we achieved that goal, and our employees were beginning to make piecework, making a bonus, making increased money. Everybody was happy. And then the owner decided, no, we need to raise the bar again. So what happened is by raising the bar of number of trays needing to be produced per hour, everybody immediately who had just gotten a taste of an increased amount of income then had a drop of income caused by me. Yeah, I was the one in the middle. And I failed 2 people there. I didn't give a fair expectation to my owner that he would have been happy with, and I didn't give my employees. I moved in the wrong direction basically with them. This turnaround, when I was implementing piecework, we set very high standards that I wasn't sure if they were going to be achievable, and we would go periods of months watching improvement in efficiency, but still not meeting that bonus level. And we slowly ticked it down over the course of several months to a point where now employees began to reach it. And I tell you, the second they began to reach it, when they were starting to approach that 12 trays an hour and they were getting the taste of their first bonuses, they went from doing 11 to 12 trays an hour immediately, very quickly past that. People were able to surpass that. And so it worked very well, but you want to start with too high of a goal, not too high, but a little bit higher than out of reach, and then work down. You don't want to work in a low goal and then increase that goal after it's been achieved, because it's very demotivating to people who work as hard as they do to be as productive as they are for our industry. So keep that in mind. Don't raise the bar after it's been achieved. In fact, start with a bar that's maybe a little bit out of reach, see what your team can achieve, and then lower that bar. It makes you look like a compassionate manager and somebody who's aware of what's going on. But have your owner of the company, the person who's making this investment, know that that's the strategy. We will start here and we will work our way back to something that's more reasonable and achievable. And the company will profit, and so will your employees. So with that, I want to thank everyone for their time and for listening to everything. And if there are any questions or comments, I welcome those at this time. Thank you.
Chris, thank you for your presentation. Before we jump into our Q&A, I'd like to encourage you all to join us for next month's GrowPro webinar on beneficial insects done right, techniques for handling, receiving, and application with Suzanne Wainwright Evans on March 25th. The links to register will be in the chat. Now I'd like to open up the session for Q&A. So the first question I see here in the chat is, how did you find or choose agronomics as the supplier?
For the piece of machinery, we actually spoke with a few different vendors. I had experience at a previous job working with agronomics, and was very impressed with the quality of their equipment, how it stood, how it withstood years of use, and their technical support and whatnot. So I had a previous relationship and experience with them. Also, they worked with us on the quote. They worked with us on the timeline. We did look at a few other vendors and compared some of the materials that the equipment was made out of, and compared different experiences that people had had with them, because there's several people here that were helping to make that decision. So we looked at, I think initially 5 different companies, but really spoke to 2. And Ed Agronomics, again, did a very good job, and I guess Adept Ag now, I believe they've changed ownership. But we had a lot of support. We had people here. We had a lot of communication as to where they were at in the manufacturing process, delivery process, and this and that. And I appreciated working with them again in this experience, and it worked out well. But there's many suppliers, both stateside and over in Europe as well, that are all reputable suppliers as well.
All right, thank you. Next question is, how did you reduce headcount and what do you recommend for that aspect of attaining your ROI?
So you have, I didn't cover that in the webinar, but when you're reducing headcount, you have to think about how you're going to do that. If a machine shows up on your dock and you start assembling it, and that later that week, 4 people are dismissed. Those are people's friends, possibly people's family. You're causing a problem that maybe you didn't need to cause, and that might not have been the best way to handle that situation. I'm not saying there's not a place for something of that nature. It just seems quite abrupt, and trying to count or acknowledge your profit before you've gotten the full change of culture and change to occur with your employees. So having a talk with your employer or the owner, and also and saying that, look, I'm going to allow through attrition. In our case, it was through attrition that we were going to, there is turnover that occurs, and we were going to stabilize the headcount and allow it to naturally lower itself over the course of a year, for the headcount to drop and for 4 positions to not then be replaced, and then to move people around through different departments to ensure that those would be eventually people from production would be utilized in other areas, and the production team would be smaller as our goal intended. But it was going to be done over a course of months, which actually worked quite well, because we also had a ramp up time. We had some things to learn. So making an abrupt change wasn't appropriate in this scenario. At the same time, you do also have to work with your employer and maybe come up with a deadline. You don't want to keep people on indefinitely and end up having a team that has excess employees on it and not get that return on investment. So maybe your employer can tolerate that for 6 months or 9 months or the rest of the year, whatever that may be. But create a timeline, a deadline, a fair expectation, and if necessary, when doing layoffs, consider a small severance package for those employees, since you're about to gain an increase in profit. Helping to take care of employees when they leave helps them, makes you just a more altruistic type employer, but also sends a message to your other employees that stay, that you care about people. And I think your third option is, if you're looking to expand, and there will be other jobs and other departments for them to go to, moving them from one department to another, allowing expansion to occur, but keeping the same number of employees through the adaptation of automation, is another way to handle that scenario. But knowing that at the time of making the initial proposition is part of this planning process.
So Henry asks, the North American horticulture industry in general looks up to Europe for benchmark ideas about automation, but usually the approach to growing and complexity are very different. Based on your experience, are there any suppliers in Asia, Japan, China, etc., that could offer similar equipment than some European suppliers, but with better customer service or parts availability in North America? For context, we're in Western Canada.
It's a great question, and unfortunately, I'm sure there are suppliers. I'm not familiar with them. One of the things that a lot of European companies have done, and they do tend to be quite advanced with a lot of these technologies, but with more simplistic growing structures, because they're primarily growing one or a handful of crops, and we have a lot of complexity. But a lot of the technology we're buying here, and this is a very simple form of automation, nothing too complicated, not like ISO machines, or I guess now TTA ISO machines or whatever. But I mean, there's much more complex automation that's out there, and I'm sure there is similar machinery and technology that's available out of Asia. I'm not the best to give reference to those, and I haven't worked with a company from there myself personally. But one of the things I've seen from European suppliers, more and more so, is they're making a concerted effort to be present in the United States, have offices here, have materials stored in the United States and also, well, so they're present in the US and able to service machinery here with people on the ground and with parts in the US or in Canada, same as well. Maybe it's over the border, but they're positioning themselves in multiple places around the world to provide a better service. I'm just not aware of an Asian company that's currently doing that at this point in time. And what I've noticed actually recently when I went to IPM a few weeks ago, and a lot of the machinery nowadays, like so when you buy a transplanter, for example, they're installing cameras on them that are remote controlled via the web, and a technician could be at their location, whether it's your side of the Atlantic or theirs, and can be looking physically at your machine, at people, at parts. You can hold stuff in front of the camera so you can physically address the hardware, but also they can log in remotely and address some software issues if there's a configuration that needs to be changed or something tweaked and you don't have that skill set. So people are finding remote ways to do that as well. So there are multiple options, and I apologize, I don't have a better answer for you on a specific vendor to consider.
Next question from Ahmad. What is the best or accepted ROI timeline, generally speaking, of course? 6 months, 1 year, or 18 months?
Kind of depends on your boss, I guess, or whoever holds the wallet or the purse. I think in general, and this was part of a panel that I was a part of recently on a similar topic. The rule of thumb that we're hearing is around 2 years is kind of an acceptable rule of thumb in this industry, and at least with our accounting department. Um, Faster than that, I know I kind of get a green light if I'm going to have an ROI in less than 2 years. Pretty much that's a no brainer. Get it done. If it's going to be over 2 years, you do definitely need to start better factoring in maintenance costs, because over the course of 2+ years, you're going to incur costs that you need to attribute to that return on investment, and how much you're going to spend on maintenance a year. You need to factor that in at that point. I think you're safe to not necessarily look at every single little detail like that within the first 2 years is like a grace area, but anything over 2 years, you need to consider how many parts you're going to be buying a year. You have to consider how much of the year it's not going to be in operation while you're getting it maintenance. It's probably only going to be a few days, but you need to start looking at all those additional costs that will accumulate over that time, because that slows down your return on investment. So it's something to consider once you cross that 2 year mark, would be my rule of thumb.
Great, thanks, Chris. I also wanted to mention we got a message from Kelly saying that this was a great overview of the process of automation. And she works for one of the other automation suppliers in the industry and thinks that you hit on most, if not all, of the important points to be considered.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Next question, what was your headcount at Phoenix when you started in 2023 and now at the start of 2025?
Not related only to this scenario that we discussed, but when I started in 2023, we had 71 employees. We just finished our record year in 2024, and we ended the year with 49 employees. So 71 to 49. That's with lots of little changes. So there are really cool, awesome, interesting technologies out there. And I encourage you guys to consider some of the technologies that are out there, like the ISO machine and things of that nature. But you don't have to get the Rolls Royce to get from point A to point B either. Um, there's plenty of really cool advances in technology. You go over to Europe and they have machines that can work 24/7, picking tomatoes at the exact same specific amount of ripeness, something that a person could never achieve by using different color spectrums and all this stuff. It's extremely interesting. There's better and better environmental controls, and there's all these things that you can invest in, and you have to see if that's right for your company. But we had a huge drop in headcount. We had a record year in 2024, higher than any year of COVID, and with the lowest headcount we've had in many years. By making small changes, by looking at processes and saying, they're working way too hard to achieve not as much as I'd like, and never don't get me wrong, I'm guilty of learning the old way as well of work faster, work harder. Um, but we're competing more and more so with other industries that have nice work environments that are comfortable, that are indoors, that are out of the sun. Minimum wage continues to go up throughout the country. Skilled labor is less and less available. People who want to work in this industry is less and less available. So don't this method of pushing to work harder and faster is a great way to lose employees, have high turnover, and isn't the best way to grow your company sustainably. Um, but looking at where you can make slight changes to process and slight improvements and incorporate technology, even at a lower end of the spectrum, that is years behind Europe. They always got the cool gadgets. And then there also are going to be opportunities where you do look at more sophisticated forms of technology as well to take your company to a even higher level. Or if you're a larger company that has a lot more labor requirements, and you can make that investment and get that return on investment in a short period of time. It's really about weighing out the risk versus benefits, I guess, on each of these scenarios. Um, but we have not made a ton of dramatic changes, and yet we've dropped our headcounts considerably. And I'm very happy to say that all of our employees have received some relatively, they all have received increases, if not significant increases, during the last 2 years because of the improvements we've been able to make for our owner and but also for them and for the entire team. We're in the middle of spring right now. Um, I promise you, the last 2 years, I would not have an hour to spend speaking with you in the last two springs. But I am able to do that now because we have things more stable than we did a couple years ago, and we're looking to have another good year. So,
Great, thanks, Chris. A question from Kelly. Which conference, meeting, or other source do you feel is the best way for you to keep up with opportunities in automation?
um, honestly, I haven't been to I used to go to OFA, but I haven't been to Cultivate now in several years. But I think Cultivate's a great venue. There's a lot of machinery technology available to look at there. They often have interesting courses that may or may not be related to improvements in technology, but in some way they often are. I went the last time I went there, and it just doesn't work out for me timing wise. I'm always very, very busy during the time of year or have been busy during the time of year whenever Cultivate's running. So I just haven't been in several years for that reason. But they've often had very good educational classes. They've taught about everything from LEDs and working with different labor organizations and different things of that nature. So there is some education there. I've had the luxury of being able to attend IPM in Essen, Germany, the last few years with ForemostCo. Um, there is a huge number of vendors, primarily from Europe, but also from Asia. There's some US presence there as well. But you get to see kind of what's coming up in the next 5 to 10 years in automation and also how it's currently being applied normally on a single crop or a few crop or a single pot size anyways type setting. But you come home and you can figure out where can you how is it possible for you to do something similar in your own facility? And there's often a lot of things that I take away from that trip, and it's not the cheapest place to go to. Traveling there and staying there for the time, but if you can also um, reach out to some people and see if you can get some visits to different nurseries and whatnot. Everybody over there tends to be extremely nice, especially in Netherlands, Belgium, wherever. And they're normally open doors and willing to show off what they have and share ideas and talk things through. And I'd encourage you to invite them to come visit you in the U.S. when they are stateside, or Canada. I keep saying the U.S., but anywhere in North America. Um, because there's opportunities to learn from each other and share that. I think the idea of being mm, so isolationist in this industry of it's my patented or not patented, but it's my secret sauce, it's my secret method is something that has it's not as prevalent. I see in Europe, people are much more open doors. And so honestly, if you see some companies that do something similar to what you do in the US, reach out to them, get in contact with them, make the trip worth it, go to IPM, see the technology, talk with many different vendors, and also see some of the machinery in action throughout Europe as you drive around throughout the week to see practical usages of that machinery. If you speak to one of these vendors, they'll tell you who in the area would be using it that you could set up an appointment with often, and that's a great resource, is reaching out, talking with other growers and production facilities.
All right, thanks, Chris. I think that that's going to wrap it up for today. So thank you for joining us today for another session of AFE's Grow Pro webinar series. You can join us next month as well. And for Suzanne Wainwright Evans' presentation. And you can register for both at endowment.org/growpro. While you're there, you can also check out our past webinar recordings, other grower-related resources, and research reports available for you for free, thanks to industry support. We ask that you please complete the brief survey about today's session when you can, suggest additional topics, and also to help us continue to improve these webinars. So thank you for joining us again today, and have a great day.